Hi, this is Debbie with Book and Bujo, and welcome here. Today we are going through my 13 spooky reads from Halloween. So first off, I read House of Leaves. So I was so excited to read this book. I've been waiting forever to get this from my library. I mean, the book is like beautiful, it's stunning, it's super creative, it's crazy, all the things that are in this book, like the different formatting on the different pages, like it's crazy. Like some of the things that they do in here, there's times when like the hallway is getting smaller and so the print on the page is getting smaller to kind of mimic that, or if they're going up or going down, the words move up or down the page, and it's just so intriguing. And then you even have some music stuff in here, and like, yeah, it's just crazy. But well, here's some other interesting pages, and there's a couple, there's some pictures in here as well. Let's see if I can find some of them. So there's just some really amazing things in this book, and I really wanted to like this book. I wanted to love it. I wanted to be scared. I wanted to have to only read it during the day, because if I read it at night, I'd have bad dreams. And none of it happened. I was kind of disappointed. I think a lot of that was on me. I had really high expectations from just listening to all the hype and everyone talk about it every year, because this came out in 2000. So, you know, it's had a lot of time to build up a following. It's definitely a cult favorite kind of book. I was invested in the characters. Like, I was really interested in each of the sets of characters. So you had the Navidsons, and everyone involved with that. I do wish we learned a little bit more from the kids' perspective, because I think they would have had a much different perspective than the adults. I would have been interested to have an interview done with Daisy or Chad, the kids, just to see what their take on things were. Whether it be when they were older, because I mean, you don't necessarily want to interview a small child on something that might have been scary for them. So maybe later when they're thinking back on it. But then you also had Johnny Truant, which he was a great character as well. Not necessarily someone I could super relate to, not having lived the same kind of life, obviously. And then also Zampano. They were all very interesting. I was intrigued by them. I was invested in them. I cared what happened to them. But I think where it fell short for me was actually the atmosphere. So I feel like some of the creativeness and uniqueness of this book, with all the footnotes and everything that's in here. So there's footnotes on most of the pages, but some of the footnotes, so like this one, so a footnote starts here, and then you turn the page and you have two more pages of that same footnote, and then the footnote ends here. So then you're thrown back into the story where you stopped before the footnote started. And I feel like some of those just took you out of the story, and then you had to jump back in. You're like, oh, where were we? What was happening? Like, do I care anymore? Some of the footnotes were dry data type of footnotes, like here's the book, this kind of like bibliography type things, which is great. And some of it was really interesting. There was a couple spots in here where it talked about like different houses and things like that in different areas. And I'm from Arizona, and they actually mentioned 2 houses in Arizona. So I had to go look those up and see. I'm like, is this a real house? Is there really a thing here? And then I have friends that live in Austin, and they had one listed there for Austin. It's called the House in Austin, and that one was actually really interesting house. So I had to tell them to go take a look at that one too. So I mean, there are some really cool little footnotes in here. It's also pages like this And yeah, so you have to turn the book around to be able to read some of the different areas, but it just fell flat for me. So you have the technical footnotes, carbon dating and things like that, which, yes, the results were really interesting. But it just lacked something for me. I just couldn't get into the atmosphere. So the times that were supposed to be like scary, so you're in the house and this stuff is happening, I just felt like the atmosphere of it wasn't built up enough, or it just wasn't drawn out enough. It was too short because you got thrown into some other footnotes, so you weren't stuck in that atmosphere like they were. So to me, it just wasn't immersive into the scariness, I guess. So if I think of this as more like a horror and a mystery, I think it works really well. As a thriller or spooky book, not as much to me. Again, I did enjoy reading it. I'm glad I read it. I don't have any regrets for reading it. Would I ever read it again? No, definitely not. They had some poems and things like that. Like, so they have this whole appendix at the end. They have this really long index, which totally makes sense. I mean, there's a huge index in the back, which totally makes sense why it's there. And some of it, like, there's a whole appendix back here that's all letters from Johnny's mom to him. And so it was really interesting reading that. You got to get, so that added to the great character development that we had throughout the book. So I think I just went into this book, reading this book with the wrong expectations. But yeah, I enjoyed it. If you like something unique, interesting, and a little different, you don't mind something that's kind of long that might take you a while to read, I would totally recommend this book. Because it is unique, it is very different, it's very interesting, it's intriguing, it's just something out of the ordinary, it's very unique. House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I would recommend it as something different. It's a mystery, has a horror paranormal aspects to it. A lot of trigger warnings for this book. There's a lot of them, so make sure, if you're someone who gets triggered by things, make sure you check those out before you read this. I read The Vampire Lestat. So we're following Lestat it's the second book in the Interview with a Vampire. It was definitely better to me than Interview with a Vampire. I felt that was, to me, was a little boring. Just the interview format, I felt could have been done a little better. It was very dry. But The Vampire Lestat, you're almost more like you're in Lestat's head. So you're actually following him, remembering all the different time periods that he lived in. And I feel like it was done much better. The world building was really good. The characters were really good. And you get to know some of him a little better, as well as some of the other people that were in his life, living life and vampiric life. And then you also get to see some of the other characters from Interview with a Vampire that come into this book as well later on, after Interview with the Vampire was over, which I did enjoy that. So I did really enjoy the second book a lot better than the first one, and I'm interested to see, maybe next Halloween I will read the third book in the series. The Vampire Lestat was the second book, which is what I read this year, by Anne Rice. Then I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, and this one I really liked, so it was really good. I also feel it could have gone a little deeper into something. It was missing a little something for that extra spooky vibe, if I'm going for wanting to be scared, but more the paranormal and the making you think and wonder, and in that aspect, it was amazing. So there was parts that we're following this family where somehow arsenic got into the sugar bowl and killed most everyone in the family. You have two sisters and an uncle that survived, and they're still living in the castle. And the townspeople are very against them. they try and avoid them, but then they also taunt them and all of that, which is sad. But you're following them, and you're following these two sisters, and then a long-lost cousin shows up of one of the uncle's other brothers. And is it a good thing? Is it not? What's going to happen from here? And so the whole book you're trying to figure out, like, or at least I was trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, so what's going on? And so maybe this happened, or maybe this happened. And so I really liked that aspect of it, where it kept me guessing and kept me trying to like think ahead and figure some things out before it actually happened. So that was really fun. But then at the end, I feel like the ending was a little too vague for me. I did really like it, but I feel like the ending was just a little too vague. So then I read Coraline, which was adorable. I've never seen the movies, but I did read the book, and I've heard a lot about it. And it was really cute. I liked it. I enjoyed it. So we're following Coraline. Her and her family moved to this house, and then she goes through this locked door, and it's almost like a mirror world where there's the new mom and the new dad, and if she stays there, she can be with that family and all of that. And so then she's realizing that this isn't really her mom and dad, and she wants to get back to her actual mom and dad, and how's she going to do that, and finding some friends along the way to help her out. The cat was great. I really liked the cat's character in that one. And then I read Nightbooks, and this one was by J.A. White, and that was so cute. I really liked that one. So we're following a young man who is in middle school, junior high area, and he loves horror books, monsters, horror movies, all of that kind of stuff. And he loves to write, so he likes to write scary stories and stories about monsters and everything. And he gets teased at school and doesn't fit in with anyone at school because they all like sports and clothes and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And so he's kind of the odd man out and gets picked on and all of that. And so he's done with that. He wants to just be a normal guy, stop doing all the scary stuff. And then he finds himself drawn into a neighbor's apartment that is watching one of his favorite movies, Night of the Living Dead. He loves Night of the Living Dead. And so they go in, he goes into the apartment, stranger danger, goes into the apartment to watch the movie, and he ends up getting trapped by a witch and is trying to figure out how to get out. And he ends up having to write a different story, a scary story, or read to the witch a scary story every night to keep the house asleep or in slumber. And then it kind of goes from there. He meets another girl that's trapped there. And then they're trying to figure out how do they escape. They find notes scattered throughout the library of this other person who was trapped there as well, who kind of figured out how to escape. And so they're trying to follow her notes to figure out how to get out of the house and away from the witch. And it's got some Hansel and Gretel themes in there, and it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. So that was my kind of spooky book, where I like more of the middle grade spooky books that don't scare me so much. So then I read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, and this one was really fun. So there's a young toddler, baby, 1, 2, 3 years old, I don't remember exactly, still in diapers, and he decides to just go wandering out of his house one night and walks down the street. They happen to live near a graveyard. He walks into the graveyard, and they take him in as one of their own and the ghosts that live there, and he ends up becoming part of their family. And as he grows up, he learns different ways of ghosty ways, things of the graveyard. He gets full access to the graveyard even though he's a living boy. He gets tutored by ghosts, old teachers and things like that. And he finds out that it's not safe for him to be outside of the graveyard because people are looking for him and they want to harm him. And as you go through, you find out other things about the boy and his family. He meets a girl. Her family, it's also a nature reserve, so there's a family, a husband and wife and a young girl that come in and once a week and hang out in the reserve, and she wanders around and she meets Bod, or Nobody is his name, Nobody Owen, and Nobody and I'm blanking on her name, Samantha, starts with an S, Stella? But they become friends, and they hang out, they can wander around. She thinks that he's an imaginary friend, and her parents never really saw who it was, so they tell her, oh yeah, it's imaginary friends, totally healthy, it's great. And so, which I think was really nice to show parents being positive about kids' imaginations in the book. And then we go through and he's growing up and he finds out more about his history, and he ends up going to a public school, so out of the graveyard, and some issues happen and he ends up back in the graveyard, and there's a whole bunch of things going on, and in the end he finds out what actually happens with his family. He reunites with his friend, and it's just a fun story. It's a good found family story. And I also read Cemetery Boys by Eden Thomas, and this one was great. The trans perspective was done really well. Of course, it's by a trans author, so that definitely helps with that. So in Cemetery Boys, we follow Yadriel and Martiza, their cousins, and they find Julian, and in the process of Halloween and getting together with their ancestors that come alive as ghosts, that they can interact with the other family members. This book mainly has the themes of character building and character growth and building relationships and getting to know who you really are and being okay with yourself and hoping that your family members will be okay with that as well. I really love the character growth aspect and the relationships that are in this book. It was really good. It was just a perfect Halloween October read. Then I read Nettle Bone. So this one I actually had from my library. If I can get it without a whole lot of glare. So Nettle Bone by T. Kingfisher. So we're following Mara, and she's given 3 impossible tasks that she needs to complete, and then the Dust Wife will then help her to save her sister. And the first one is to weave a cloak of nettles, and then second task is to build a bone dog, and then she has to capture moonlight in a jar. She completes 2 of the tasks. She goes back to the Dust Wife, and the Dust Wife is like, oh my gosh, how did you complete these things? Like, you're not supposed, these are impossible tasks. I didn't want to have to help you. How did you actually do these things? And so she helps her with the 3rd task, and then they go on this this trek to save her sister, and they find help and some family along the way. So I love the nettle, of course, is for the cloak. The bone is for the dog. The dog is just adorable. Oh my gosh. Cutest character ever. And then the Dust Wife also has an adorable demon chicken. How can you not love a demon chicken that hangs out the top of your staff as you're walking? It's amazing. I love it. So okay, so we follow them, the dog, the demon chicken, the Dust Wife, Mara, and they go off to save the day, and they meet some other friends and characters along the way, and they have some scary people that they have to stand up to, some difficult tasks they have to do, and then they build relationships as they go along as well. So another good one for character growth and relationship building, which is probably why I like that. But also a great fairy tale aspect to it. There's a magic system. You have fairy godmothers that aren't necessarily good. Some are evil. Very good. I highly recommend it. So then I also read S, or The Ship of Theseus, by V.M. Straka, or J.J. Abrams. This one was really fun. So it's got a similar style somewhat to House of Leaves, where there's a lot of paraphernalia, there's footnotes, annotations, and all that kind of stuff, but that's kind of where the similarities stop. So this one's more of a mystery, so we're trying to figure out who is Straka. So is S a group? Is it a person? Was it just one person and now it's a group? Is it a group that's continued? Is it still going? Is it so? Yes. So we follow Jen and Eric. So there's 22 different random pieces in this book. So some of them you have like a map that's written on a napkin. You have postcards. You have letters from Eric to Jen. You have letters from Jen to Eric. You have a whole bunch of interesting news clippings and things like that that you see throughout the book, and they coincide with different pages in the book as well. So as you can see, this is Jen and Eric annotating as they go. Some of them are about the book itself, some of them are about the two of them, questions for each other, and becoming friends throughout the pages. There's also, let's see if I can find some, there's a lot of footnotes in here. The author wrote the book itself, but then you have the editor and translator, and there's a bunch of footnotes in here as well. It's just really interesting. So they're trying to figure out, Jen and Eric are trying to figure out who Straka is, who S is, and they have some perils along the way. So there's a whole bunch of people in the world trying to figure out who S is, and they're all competing with each other. They're all trying to find clues and paraphernalia from the different areas that would prove their theory correct. And so then they're trying to stop other people from being able to prove their theories and maybe steal their work to add it to their own, or to cover up stuff that might show that their theory is incorrect. It was just such an interesting book. Like, again, relationship building between Jen and Eric is just beautiful. The growth of the characters, and just their showing their research styles and how they came across things and how they found different things for the book was just amazing. It was so much fun. I just thoroughly enjoyed reading that one. 4.5 stars, most definitely. So this is one of my most anticipated reads, one I keep putting off for some reason, just not getting to it, and I finally got to it this year, and I'm so glad I did. So this one is by Wendy Webb, and The Haunting of Brynn Wilder. Loved it. It was so good. It was intriguing. It was interesting. Had you guessing, like, are we going through time? Is this just a haunting? Is it just the paranormal aspect? Is there reincarnation? Is there, like, there's so many different aspects to this. It was just so good. So we follow Brynn, and she has just been a caretaker for her mom, who recently passed away from cancer. And she is now taking a much needed break over the summer in this little seaside town in the kind of Michigan area. And she's going to visit one of her old friends, and she's going to stay there for the month and just recuperate before she goes back to school, to the university, to teach in the fall. And so she's an English literature teacher. So while she's at this inn, so it's kind of like a bed and breakfast type place that rents either weekly, nightly, monthly for the whole summer. So she stays there, and she meets Alice and Gary. Alice is the owner, Gary is the bartender and the chef and just the all-around fix-it guy there. And then she also meets Gil and Jason, who are also some other monthly, the ones that will be there all summer. They're staying there. And then she also meets Dominic, which is another person who is staying there for the summer. And Dominic is of course, the hot love interest guy. And he has tattoos all over his entire body. So of course then there's all these references to the Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. So I'm actually kind of interested in reading that one now after reading this book. Which is a story, again, of somebody with tattoos all over them, and the tattoos tell a different story for each person. The Haunting of Brynn Wilder is a beautiful love story. So, with an awesome twist at the end. So you're kept guessing about this lady that passed away in room number 5. Who is she? What's her story? And Brynn and Dominic are trying to figure out who this is. Is this who is haunting Brynn? And things keep happening. And who is Dominic? There's a lot of fishiness around him, and trying to figure out who he is. Is he legit? Is he a bad boy? Is he not? Is he a good guy? And the end was just beautiful. Part of it you could guess ahead. Part of it you're like, I think this might be what's going to happen. And then when it does, you're like, yes. It was really good. It was a beautiful story. I loved it. And then I also read Sanctuary by V.V. James. This was perfect book for the spooky season. So you follow Sarah and Harper. Sarah is the mom and Harper's her daughter. And Sarah is a witch, and they live in kind of the Salem area. And Harper, being a witch doesn't always go every generation. Sometimes it skips a generation. And so Sarah's mom was not a witch, but her grandmother was. And Sarah's daughter is not a witch. So Harper is not a witch. They did the testing for it, the little rites when they reach a certain age, and Harper was not a witch. And so we're following her story. She is dating one of the big sports heroes of the school, and he mysteriously dies at a party. So was it an accident? Was it not? And since everybody loved him, and they're blaming everything on Harper, saying that he was killed by a witch, and so now this new witch hunt is taking place, and Sarah's the only witch in town that they know of. And so everyone's going after her and Harper, and basically anything that's ever happened in the town since Sarah got there, they're blaming everything on her. And so this major witch hunt takes place. And by the end of the book, I was like, what? Yes! No way! So yeah, the ending was amazing. So good. Kind of had theories about it, like, oh, I think might be what's happening, oh, I wonder about this, oh, I wonder about that, but the author just kept you guessing from, oh, maybe it's this person, maybe it was this person, maybe this happened, oh, what was that, maybe it's this. So good. So good. Totally recommend it. 5 stars. 4.5, 5 stars. Yeah. Alright, and then I read Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant. This also was so good. Like, mermaids, they're not like the Little Mermaid. No. Killer mermaids. They're gonna eat you. Yeah. Are they real? Are they not? Who knows? So we follow Tori Stewart, and her sister was a host on a ship that went to Mariana Trench, and they wanted to prove that mermaids were real, and everyone on board died. They got footage. It pretty much shows that mermaids are real, but the whole thing was like, oh, is it a hoax? Was it real? Like, oh, what a tragic accident. But Tori wants to find out what actually happened to prove that, yes, her sister was killed by mermaids. So we're following Tori as she goes on this trek with her friend and fellow researcher, Luis, and they are trying to prove a point, because now Imagine, which is the company that put on the first ship, or the first voyage out to the Mariana Trench to prove that mermaids were real, mainly for ratings, of course, because it's like a television movie company. And so they are sending in a second expedition out to prove that, yes, the mermaids are real and find out what really happened and all of that. And so Tori and Luis are there as researchers. They're going to help prove this theory. And then along the way you have Olivia, who is the new host for Imagine, that is there to document everything that's going on. And oh my gosh, so good. Such a good book. So we have this ship of like 400 scientists and crew and cameramen and all of that, and they are neck deep in the water and everything that's going on. So they are so excited to be researching and getting the chance to put in their probes and cameras and lights and taking water samples and all of that kind of stuff. At the Mariana Trench, no one ever really goes there too often, at least not on purpose. At least not on purpose. So, yes, of course, horror movie ensues. Mermaids are real. They start eating people. So it was really good. I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you how accurate any of the science talk is that's in it, but it was very entertaining. It was like I was watching a horror movie. I could picture everything in my mind as it was happening. And just the relationships and interactions, the banter between all of the people. You have Olivia, who has kind of taken the place of Tori's sister. So there's some animosity there between Tori and Olivia. You got LGBTQIA plus rep in here, as well as just great character building, world building. Like the atmosphere was amazing. The world building, of course, somewhat easy because it's present day. But you also have this whole world under the sea with fictional characters, fictional creatures. Yeah, so good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I would totally watch this if this came out of the movie, because I can totally buy mermaids with like razor sharp teeth getting ready to eat you, like a Jaws mouth, like with the sharks that's just coming at you. So good. Yes. All right. And then the last couple books that I read was Babel. So Great Dark Academia. So we're following Robin and his cohort as they are at Oxford and in the translation department. And this has so many amazing representations in the book. It was really good. It's a very slow paced book, and it's basically built. The whole book is about characters. It's very character driven. So if you're looking for action packed, fast paced stuff going on, you're not going to find that here. This is a slow, dark academia, character driven book, and I loved it. I am all for character building every single time. Love it. I love the action. I like plot driven. I like all of that too. But number one for me is characters and relationships. So there's a lot of classism, elitism, racism, all of that. Rich versus poor. You can come here because you're useful, but you don't really have much value aside from that. So you can't stay in the dorms because you don't fit our mold. So you can come here and learn, but you have to live way out over here and walk 2 miles to get to the school. Some of those kind of things. And the relationship between father and son, and just between the cohort itself. It was the best dark academia, like perfect for that genre. And then the last one I read was In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. Okay, so if we go between The Secret History, If We Were Villains, and In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, I might actually put them in that order. This one was really good. I really liked If We Were Villains. The Secret History was really good, but I liked If We Were Villains much more. And I'm thinking I almost like If In My Dreams I Hold a Knife a little bit better. It was very believable. Again, great dark academia setting. You've got the cohort of friends that meet freshman year. You got some romance, some love triangles going on, and then of course there's always a murder and who did it and the amazing twist at the end. So we're mainly following Jessica, and we mainly have all the perspective for the most part is from Jessica's perspective. So good. I flew through that one so quickly. It was page turner. I couldn't wait to see what happened. So in this group of friends, one of them of course gets murdered, and they have to figure out who did it. They're blaming one person who of course was the boyfriend at the time. There's all these scandals, like other relationships going on, and we have love triangles. Does everyone actually have a part in this? Did everyone play some kind of role? And throughout the last half of the book, so the first half of the book is kind of getting to know each of the characters and seeing how they interact with each other. There's some pretty big time jumps. Okay, so we're halfway through the first year, now we're halfway through the second year, all of a sudden from one chapter to the next, which helps keep the story moving a little more quickly so you don't have those big slow time gaps in between. And then the last half of the book, so you have the murder, and then the last half is trying to figure out who done it. So who had motive, who doesn't seem like they have motive, but maybe they actually did and we just didn't know about it. Did more than one person have a hand in this? Yeah, it was really good. And the twist at the end was icing on the cake. It was just chef's kiss, beautiful, so well done. You kind of see some of it coming, but then not necessarily at all. Some of it I was completely surprised, and then after you get that plot twist, like the reveal, and then at the end you're like, oh, well, there's even more happening here than we thought. So yeah, so far I'm thinking this is one of the best dark academia books I've read this year. Babel, I think, actually would come kind of tied with it, but just underneath it, and then If We Were Villains, and then The Secret History. So thank you so much for joining me here with my 13 spooky reads for the spooky season, and I look forward to seeing you next year, following along with me and joining in on my 13 spooky reads. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you want to get more from me, and I will see you in the comments.